Welcome to Let's Talk Writing with Kirsten and Edwina,
coming to you from Madangi country
in Babinda, Far North Queensland, Australia.
In this episode, we're talking about life writing, writing your truth. So Kirsten, I've just been helping you edit your major memoir project. So why write memoir?
Yes, good question. Why write memoir? I often get asked when I tell people I write memoir, they go, you write memoir? You're not Michelle Obama. You're not famous.
Yeah.
So I wrote my memoir because it was one of those stories that I felt needed to be told. And I wanted to write it as a story that is a plot-driven story. In my workshops, I get a lot of people who are burning to write their life stories, not necessarily for publication, but simply for the psychological release and also putting that story in order. Because if life only makes sense in hindsight. I think it was Nietzsche who said that.
Yes.
And by writing a memoir, you actually are able to shape the story so that it has an arc, and the difficult life event that you may have gone through, and we all go through difficult times in our lives, make more sense. And you can then also see the benefit, the gifts that come out of a crisis often.
Yes.
And the main reason, however, to write a memoir really is writing about an episode in your life that changed you fundamentally and that has a universal message for others. So, for example, in my case, I write about grief and how that changed me and how I garnered gifts from the journey through grief. But there's also lots and lots of different memoir. I've read so many memoir now, and often I follow a memoir that is about something unrelated to my life, and I'm so engrossed in the story because the story is well told, and the universal aspect of that story has just grabbed me.
Yes. I think that's the main difference between memoir and autobiography. So you get an autobiography or a biography of all the famous people, the Michelle Obamas. A memoir is very different. It's centered around a particular time in life or a particular theme.
Yes.
So it might be, say, about your experience of motherhood or your experience of loss. Of course, grief starts a lot of us writing memoir. This is the closest I've come to a published memoir at the moment too. And again, it's based on grief. So it's my experiences of loss throughout my life. But it's more self-help. It's a combined memoir self-help, because when you're grieving, you want some practical things to help yourself. And I've put everything that I did to help myself in there, things that worked. But because writing about difficult situations is very cathartic and healing. I think it's because writing it the first time, it's very important to get all the details. It also gives you space to cry. And that's an important part of the process of healing our trauma through writing, is when we are writing, let yourself feel those things and let yourself cry. It's okay to feel sorry for yourself if shit happens. It's okay. You don't have to feel, I'm being self-pitying. No, you have a right to feel sorry and tell your story and tell your side of the story. But then, as you have found, when you write and rewrite this story, it's not you as you are now. It's that old you. And when you write about yourself in memoir, you become a character.
Yes.
So that distances you from the situation and those things. And by honing the writing and creating a work of beauty from all that pain, you create something good from all of that bad, as well as creating meaning
for yourself. Yes.
You create that universal creation of beauty that others can gain something from.
Yes. I mean, it is a very cathartic process. For me, the catharsis actually was writing it in my journals, writing it over and over, and also allowing myself, like you said, to cry and to be angry and to really let out those strong emotions, leaning into the strong emotions. But then, like you said, when I wrote it up as a memoir, which was 10 years later, so obviously the story suddenly no longer really belonged to the person it belonged to before. Before, it belonged to a very vulnerable and broken person. That person, in the meantime, had made it herself whole again. And now, writing that story, I become the narrative. I become the protagonist. And like I think you said, it's removing the "it happened to me." You write, "it happened," and it could happen to anybody. Probably in very, very different circumstances, different, different storyline. However, the emotions that I describe will be emotions that most of us will visit at one point in our lives.
Yes.
And so the catharsis, there's a second catharsis when you then write it up as a memoir, because you can then also see how far you have come as a writer to let those stories go, or to, like you said, package them into a work of beauty. And that is the power of writing memoir, really.
Yes. And that distancing, recognizing that is the old me. And I think that that's very important too, to have that bit of distance so that you have perspective.
Yeah.
It's very hard, even though it's the curse of a writer, when something is going on very big in our lives. We may find, I've found myself in terrible moments of crisis, thinking of titles for work, and I really should just be letting myself be in the moment, but I'm already trying to write it. And maybe that's because I know a lot of my healing comes from the writing of it. But in order to have that perspective, you often have to be some distance away. And I work with a lot of people with trauma, and it's only now when they're in their 60s or 70s or even 80s that they are able to put words to the trauma they endured as children.
Yes.
And feel safe enough to express it.
Yes.
But it is safe to tell your stories, and it's very important for you to tell your story.
Yes. Yeah. However, I get a lot of people at my retreats who say, I can't write that story because if somebody reads it, if so-and-so reads it, they'll get really angry, or I'll be implicating so-and-so. Well, first of all, just write the story. Just write it for yourself.
Yes.
Allow yourself to
write that version.
Own the story, to claim your voice. That is the other powerful thing about memoir. You're actually claiming your voice and you're claiming your story, because every story is, of course, subjective. So you're claiming your version of the story. And then, of course, if you do go on to write it as a memoir and then seek representation to get it published, just be very careful with ethics in memoir. That is a topic we could talk about for a long time, but let's just say, for example, don't write a memoir as an act of revenge, because we all have anger towards certain people who've hurt and wronged us in our life, but that is not the reason for writing a memoir. And when you
can write it for yourself. It's a safe way to get revenge.
Course.
Blow them up.
Yeah,
but
totally. Let it rip. But like Edwina said when she was reading through my memoir, just be really kind to your enemy. Just treat them with kindness. And for example, in my memoir, I thought long and hard about including certain parts of the story, because they were also about other people who I no longer am in contact with. And I thought long and hard how to put them into the story. Will I put them into the story? And if I do, I'll just do it with the most kindness I can muster. And perhaps, for example, in my case, there's one scene where I say, well, how would I have felt if I had been in the shoes of that person who really irritated me, and I really... well, I would have felt the same way. So that was the act of just bringing it around and saying, I can see that person's point of view as well.
Yeah, that's a great writing prompt, actually. I love it. It's in the shoes of my enemy. So even you can start with, write a scene about the worst teacher you ever had, and then you write that same scene again from the perspective of that worst teacher. So some tricks for ethics in memoir is change everybody's names completely. You can change the setting as well if it's very sensitive. If you're talking about abuse issues, only talk about what you have experienced, none of your siblings or others, because that's very, very sensitive. You can also, of course, tell your own story just for you, but you will need to do that other version that is safe for you to put out in the world as well. And you
also
can
for
also
yourself, the safety.
You can share drafts with people who are in your memoir to make sure that they're okay with it. But don't do that too early, and don't do that with too many.
And the final message is every life is a unique story. So if you feel you have a unique story to share, even if you're not a famous person like me or you, share it or write it, because every story deserves to be told or to be heard. Yes.
Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Writing with Kirsten and Edwina.
And here are our links. Please follow us and leave comments. Happy writing. That's good.